So a member of the European Commission sent Elon Musk directly and rather publicly a warning letter ahead of his conversation with Donald Trump. Not an interview. He was careful to say it wasn't an interview. But Elon Musk responded with a meme. If you want to know what I really think about that, subscribe to my other channel, Black Belt Secrets, linked in the description below. But if you want a fresh change to the mainstream media and the truth as I see it, subscribe to me here down below, like the video and ring the notification bell, and let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel. So Thierry Breton, you've probably seen this by now if you're on social media. Thierry Breton posted this: with great audience comes greater responsibility. Hashtag DSA for the Digital Services Act. I'll come back to that in a minute. He says there's a risk of amplification of potentially harmful content in Europe in connection with events with major audience around the world. I sent this letter to Elon Musk. Now, I'm going to bring this on screen in another thing which I've put a bit in red, which I'll come back to in a moment. The first thing that struck me about this letter is that the fact that it was sent to Elon Musk, not the CEO, because obviously it's talking about X and the reach that X has, and obviously it covers Europe, etc. But if I was the CEO, I'd be a little bit insulted by this personally, but it was only carbon copied to the CEO. Despite the fact that it was a public letter, he posted this on the platform, ironically. But nonetheless, it was addressed directly to Elon Musk ahead of that conversation that was on Spaces, and reads as follows. I'm writing to you in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom and in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform X of a live conversation between US presidential candidate Donald Trump and yourself, which will also be accessible to users in the EU. So this very squarely has placed this context within what's been going on in the UK. Now, if you've watched my previous videos and paid any attention to the news, you'll know that there has been severe unrest up and down the UK, which has been taken very seriously. It's been dealt with very severely. And I've done previous videos on that. If you want my other views, again, Black Belt Secrets, link below. Thierry goes on, I understand that you're currently doing a stress test of the platform. Obviously, that just means to ensure, or to try to ensure that it can cater for the traffic. Just as a side point there, it's been speculated that it was a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack. Now, without being an absolute expert on all of this, I understand from people that tell me that this is possible to affect certain spaces and not others because of the way cloud-structured infrastructure works. But that's a conversation for another day. In this context, he goes on, I'm compelled to remind you of the due diligence obligations set out in the Digital Services Act, as outlined in my previous letter. Now, I can tell you very broadly what the Digital Services Act does. It provides for content moderation, where platforms are to take measures to prevent the spread of illegal content, such as hate speech, disinformation, counterfeit goods, by way of example. There are transparency requirements where they are required to be transparent about algorithms, advertising practices, and their content moderation policies. There has to be due diligence obligations for very large online platforms, VLOPs, which are those with over 45 million users in the UK, with specific obligations to assess and mitigate systemic risks with the spread of harmful information. There's got to be user rights, safeguards, enforcements and penalties, and so on and so on. So that's what the Digital Services Act does. That's with reference in this letter. So they wrote previously reminding Elon Musk about the obligations set out in that act. It goes on, as the individual entity ultimately controlling a platform with over 300 million users worldwide, of which 1/3 in the EU, that has been designated a very large online platform, you have the legal obligation to ensure X's compliance with the EU law, and in particular the DSA in the EU. However, here's where the whole thing sort of turns on its head a little bit. Then goes on to say, this notably means ensuring, on one hand, that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism, are effectively protected. And on the other hand, that all proportionate and effective mitigation measures are put in place regarding the amplification of harmful content in connection with relevant events, including live streaming, which, if unaddressed, might increase the risk of profile of X, generate detrimental effects on civic discourse and public security. This important against the background of recent events, etc. And so, as I said, that's what the letter entailed. The EU Commission, when approached for comment, said that it does not comment on comments, so effectively said nothing more about it. The letter went on to say that as the relevant content is accessible to EU users and being amplified also in our jurisdiction, we cannot exclude potential spillovers into the EU. Therefore, we are monitoring the potential risks in the EU associated with the dissemination of content that may incite violence, hate and racism in conjunction with major political or societal events around the world, including debates and interviews in the context of elections. But this has also given rise to lots of questions. For example, why make this letter public so that everybody can see it? On the one hand, you could argue transparency. On the other hand, you could say that this is a public swipe at X and Elon Musk by making the letter public so that everyone can see it, to let everybody know that they've been warned, etc. Another question raised that I've seen in the comments is this just an attack on the democratic process, i.e., Elon Musk sitting down with Donald Trump and endorsing Donald Trump? Is that not somehow having some kind of effect on the election process? Because obviously there's going to be conversations to come about the contents of this conversation, how very meta, between Elon Musk and Donald Trump and what people have said about it. But overall, this letter just seemed to me to be a warning to say that if we find any illegal content on X within the EU, we will use this against you, and we'll use all the provisions of the DSA, which obviously can impose financial penalties, etc., in line with all the investigations that are going on and the amplifications of this, that, and the other. So a very stark, broad, and indeed public warning directly to Elon Musk, and not, in fact, to the CEO, which I might have expected. The Trump campaign obviously bashed the letter, with Stephen Chung saying as follows: the European Union should mind their own business instead of trying to meddle in the US presidential election. Only in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's America can an undemocratic foreign organization feel emboldened enough to tell this country what to do. They know that a President Trump victory means America will no longer be ripped off because he will smartly utilize tariffs and renegotiated trade deals that puts America first. Let us be very clear, Stevens says, the European Union is an enemy of free speech and has no authority of any kind to dictate how we campaign. So isn't that the real question here as to whether the freedom of speech is actually under attack? Now, let's be clear, I've said in previous videos, inciting or encouraging violence is and should be wrong, and there should be measures taken against it, which is really what the Digital Services Act should all be about. But at the same time, this kind of fairly stern, very public warning letter sent directly to Elon Musk because he was sitting down for a conversation with Donald Trump does spark a conversation about freedom of speech and, of course, how such things might affect the presidential election. So let me know what you think in the comment section below, politely and respectfully, please. And as always, if you'd like a fresh, neutral, objective approach to these things, I would appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel here and check out my other channels below. Black Belt Secrets if you want my opinions, Daniel Shensmith if you want to learn to make money. And as always, I thank you for watching.